Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. For all you UPSC aspirants out there,
Yeah.
we're bringing you another one
Yes, indeed.
to help you get a leg up on your daily current affairs prep. So today we're diving into the big events from April 2nd, 2025.
Absolutely.
Part 1. And we might cover some ground that we've already touched upon in previous dives.
Quite likely, yes.
So think of this as a reinforcement.
Absolutely. Good opportunity.
Yeah, a good opportunity to solidify those concepts.
Definitely.
And if you find this kind of targeted approach helpful, what to do, hit that like button, subscribe, stay up to date.
Indeed. And today's session, all those areas you need for your exam.
Mm-hmm.
So from health breakthroughs to the ever-changing world of international relations.
Yeah.
And of course, we'll delve into space tech.
Of course.
Some economic indicators you should be aware of. Fascinating scientific discoveries. Some notable social movements, and even prestigious awards.
All right, well, let's get started then. And first up, we're looking at Alzheimer's disease and this experimental drug called gantenerumab. Now, as a UPSC aspirant, you're probably already familiar with Alzheimer's. It's a serious neurodegenerative disorder that affects, memory, thinking, reasoning, and it's the most common cause of dementia, actually, right?
Absolutely. It accounts for a significant majority of cases, something like 60 to 80%.
60 to 80%.
Yeah, a huge number.
Yeah.
And it's really important to make the distinction between the more typical Alzheimer's disease and this early onset
Right.
Alzheimer's disease, or EOAD.
UAE, okay.
So while most Alzheimer's occurs in people over 65, EOAD starts before that age. And although it's a smaller percentage, like 5 to 10% of all Alzheimer's cases, it does tend to progress much faster.
Oh, wow.
And that obviously poses significant challenges for individuals and their families much earlier in life.
And it's all tied to those amyloid beta proteins.
Precisely.
Those are the ones that build up in the brain and form plaques.
Yeah, and those plaques disrupt the essential communication between brain cells,
Right.
leading to their damage and eventually death.
So that's why so much research focuses on removing them.
Yeah, that's the key.
So tell me about this gantenerumab then.
So gantenerumab is an experimental drug that's shown some promise, particularly for individuals with specific genetic mutations linked to this early onset form.
Oh, okay. So it's not for every kind of Alzheimer's.
Not at this stage, no. And there were some setbacks earlier in its development.
Oh, really?
But this recent clinical trial, specifically focused on patients with genetic EOAD, has brought it back into the spotlight.
Okay, so tell me about this clinical trial. How was it designed?
Well, it was a very rigorous trial, randomized and placebo-controlled, as you'd expect.
So they had a control group that didn't get the drug.
Exactly. And they used advanced brain imaging techniques,
Oh, wow.
as well as blood-based biomarkers to really track the progression of the disease.
Yeah.
And this is what makes it so interesting. The results showed a significant reduction in amyloid plaque buildup in the brains of those who received gantenerumab.
Oh, wow. So that's really encouraging.
It suggests that this could be a way to slow down the cognitive decline associated with the disease.
And, if a drug like this proves to be really effective down the line, what kind of impact could that have on healthcare in India? We have a growing aging population.
That's a very important point, and definitely something UPSC aspirants should be thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about the individual impact. A successful treatment for EOAD could have huge societal and economic ramifications.
Mm-hmm.
Resource allocation for elder care, healthcare infrastructure. It's all connected.
Right, yeah.
It would be a game changer.
Yeah. So how does this drug actually work? I mean, what's its mechanism of action?
So gantenerumab is what we call a monoclonal antibody, which is basically a lab-created protein designed to bind to specific targets.
Okay.
In this case, it targets those amyloid beta proteins.
Okay.
And once it's attached, it acts like a sort of signal for the body's immune system,
Oh, well,
specifically attracting microglial cells.
a microglial.
Yeah, they're the brain's resident immune cells, you could say.
Oh, okay.
And this helps them break down and clear those harmful plaques more efficiently.
So it's not just about destroying the plaques, it's about helping the body's own defenses get rid of them.
Exactly.
That's the key. But, it's not just about getting the immune cells to do the work. There's also the challenge of getting the drug into the brain itself.
You're absolutely right. The blood-brain barrier is very selective about what it lets in.
Right. Protects the brain, but also makes it hard to deliver medication.
Exactly. But gantenerumab has shown some ability to cross this barrier,
Oh, that's good.
which is a big step forward compared to some earlier attempts.
Mm-hmm. But it's important to remember that despite this progress, there's still no cure for Alzheimer's, right?
That's correct. And the current FAQs highlight that.
Yeah.
So current management strategies like using medications like Dunpezil and lifestyle changes, they mainly focus on alleviating symptoms and maybe slowing down the progression, but there's no cure yet.
Okay, well, let's shift gears now from the intricacies of the brain to the broader picture of global affairs. Specifically, let's talk about the Arctic Council.
Right. A very different landscape.
Absolutely. The Arctic region has become, increasingly important on the world stage.
Definitely a real focal point, you could say.
Yeah, we're seeing this complex interplay of geopolitical interests, the very real effects of climate change, and of course the competition for resources, all happening in the Arctic.
Absolutely. And right at the heart of this is the Arctic Council. It's the main intergovernmental forum for cooperation in the region.
So when was it established?
It was formed back in 1996 through the Ottawa Declaration.
Yeah, Ottawa Declaration, okay.
Yeah, and for your UPSC prep, it's crucial to remember the members.
Okay, who are they?
So there are 8 Arctic states, Canada, Denmark representing Greenland, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Russia, Sweden, and the United States.
So basically all the countries bordering the Arctic Ocean.
Exactly, and they have sovereignty over the land and their exclusive economic zones.
Right, and I believe there are other participants as well, not just the states.
Yes, that's right. We have the permanent participants, which are 6 indigenous organizations representing the communities who've always lived in the Arctic.
Yeah, makes sense. Their input is essential.
Absolutely, and the council operates on consensus, which means both the Arctic states and these permanent participants have to agree.
Okay.
And then there are also observers, non-Arctic states like India, China, Japan, the UK, all showing a keen interest in what's happening in the Arctic.
Right, and that brings up an interesting point. China with its observer status and its ambitious Polar Silk Road initiative. I mean, could that change the power dynamics within the council?
Yeah.
And how might that affect India's interests in the region?
That's a very astute observation, and it's certainly something worth considering as those dynamics evolve. China's growing presence in the Arctic is definitely a factor to watch.
Definitely.
Especially in light of India's own interests and research activities in the region.
Now, speaking of the Arctic, there's this Northeast Passage, also known as the Northern Sea Route. Can you talk about its strategic importance?
Of course. So the Northeast Passage, which runs along Russia's Arctic coast, has enormous potential as a trade route between Europe and Asia.
Right, because it's much shorter than going through the Suez Canal.
Exactly. We're talking thousands of kilometers shorter.
Wow.
And not only that, it's an alternative to the Suez Canal, which, as we know, can be prone to disruptions.
Yeah, for sure. Geopolitical issues can really impact global trade.
Absolutely. And of course, this gives Russia a significant economic advantage since they control this increasingly navigable route.
Right. They have a lot of leverage there. So the Arctic's importance goes beyond just shipping rights then.
Oh, absolutely. There are several key reasons why it's becoming so strategically important. Firstly, there are a vast reserve of natural resources in the region.
Right. Oil, gas, minerals.
Exactly. A significant portion of the world's undiscovered resources. And as the ice melts, they're becoming more accessible.
And that leads to more competition, obviously.
Of course. And secondly, as you mentioned, the emergence of these shorter trade routes, both the Northeast and the potential Northwest Passage through Canada, they offer compelling alternatives to traditional shipping lanes.
So it's like a new frontier for global trade.
In many ways, yes. And unfortunately, wherever you have concentrated resources and strategic waterways, you tend to see increased geopolitical interest and potential for rivalry.
Right.
We're already witnessing increased military activity from major powers like Russia, the US, and China in the Arctic. This adds another layer of complexity to the security environment there.
And then you have climate change.
Yes, of course, the elephant in the room.
Yeah, the melting ice is opening up these areas, making them more accessible for resource exploration and maritime traffic, which further intensifies the competition.
Absolutely. It's a multifaceted issue with long-term consequences.
Yeah, it's also interesting that the legal framework governing the Arctic isn't as comprehensive as, say, the framework for Antarctica.
That's a crucial difference. It's something to keep in mind for your UPSC understanding.
Yep.
Unlike Antarctica, which is mostly governed by a treaty promoting peaceful scientific research, the Arctic is mainly governed by the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLS.
UNCLS, okay.
Yeah, and while UNCLS provides a framework for maritime zones and resource management, it doesn't prohibit territorial claims or military presence within exclusive economic zones.
Oh, I see. So it's a bit more of a gray area.
Exactly, and that contributes to the complex geopolitical situation in the Arctic.
Right. And of course, we should mention India's role as an observer in the Arctic Council and a research station, Hamadry, in Svalbard, Norway.
Absolutely. That highlights our scientific interest and engagement in the region.
Okay, great. Well, let's move on now from international affairs to the exciting world of space technology, specifically talking about Cartosat-3 and the importance of polar orbits. Now, you may have seen the news about Cartosat-3's incredible ability to show the extent of the earthquake damage in Myanmar.
Yes, it's a powerful example of how ISRO's Earth observation satellites are being used to assess and respond to disasters.
Yeah, it's not just about taking pictures. It's about providing crucial data for humanitarian aid and rebuilding efforts.
Absolutely real-world applications of space technology.
And Cartosat-3 isn't just any Earth observation satellite, right? It represents a significant advancement for India's space program.
Indeed, Cartosat-3 is ISRO's third-generation advanced Earth observation satellite. It's essentially the successor to the earlier IRS series.
Okay.
And its technical features are quite remarkable. It boasts a panchromatic resolution of 0.25 meters.
Wow, so that's incredibly sharp.
Yes, one of the sharpest available globally for civilian applications.
Wow.
It orbits at an altitude of 509 kilometers with a near-polar inclination of 97.5 degrees. It's also a pretty substantial satellite weighing over 1,600 kilograms.
Yeah, that's pretty big. So what are some of the applications of this high-resolution imagery?
Well beyond disaster assessment, it plays a vital role in national security and defense, providing high-resolution imagery for things like border security, strategic surveillance, and defense planning. It's even been used to support past operations.
Oh, wow.
But its applications extend far beyond security. It's also crucial for disaster management, urban planning, infrastructure development, monitoring coastal land use, creating high-resolution maps for cartography, and even detecting subtle changes in geographical features over time.
Right, so it has a lot of civilian uses as well.
Absolutely. It's a multifaceted tool with applications across various sectors.
And India has a whole range of satellites for different purposes, right?
Yes, we've developed a comprehensive satellite program to meet a variety of needs. In addition to the Cartosat series for high-resolution imaging, we have the RISAT series using radar technology for all-weather surveillance, which is essential for security and disaster monitoring.
Right, because radar can see through clouds.
Exactly. Then there's the OceanSat series focusing on oceanographic parameters and weather patterns, and of course the INSAT and Megatropic series dedicated to meteorological observations and climate research.
Wow, so we have a whole fleet of specialized satellites.
We do, and Cartosat-3 itself incorporates some cutting-edge technology. It has agile cameras that can quickly point to specific areas, high-speed data transmission systems to send back all that imagery, and sophisticated onboard computers for processing data.
So it's a very advanced piece of equipment.
It is. And it was also ISRO's first commercial order through NSIL, which shows its global competitiveness.
Yeah, that's impressive. So it was launched in 2019, right?
Correct. November 27, 2019, using the PSLV C-47 launch vehicle.
Okay, and you mentioned it's near polar orbit. Now, for those of us who might need a refresher, can you explain what a polar orbit is and why it's so important for Earth observation?
Of course. So a polar orbit is a type of low Earth orbit, typically between 200 and 1,000 kilometers in altitude. But what makes it different from an equatorial orbit is its path. Instead of circling the Earth around the equator, a satellite in a polar orbit travels from north to south or near north to south, passing over or close to the poles.
Okay.
Now, a true polar orbit goes directly over the poles, but even orbits that deviate up to about 10 degrees are still considered polar orbits.
And this trajectory is what makes it so useful for observing the Earth, right?
Exactly. The key advantage of a polar orbit is that it provides coverage of the entire Earth's surface over time. As the satellite goes from pole to pole, the Earth rotates beneath it. So eventually the satellite passes over every part of the planet.
Oh, I see. It makes sense.
And this makes polar orbits essential for things like detailed Earth observation mapping, environmental monitoring, comprehensive climate studies, and reconnaissance missions.
So it's all about getting that global perspective.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And speaking of global perspectives, there's also been news about the first human spaceflight to use a polar orbit.
Oh, really? Tell me about that.
So a recent SpaceX mission called FRAM-2, launched on a Falcon 9 rocket, became the first crewed mission to enter a polar orbit.
That's pretty groundbreaking.
Yes.
What makes this first human polar orbit so significant?
Well, for one thing, as we've discussed, the polar trajectory allows for complete observation of the Earth's surface. So for human missions, this opens up new possibilities for direct observation, especially in areas crucial for climate research and environmental monitoring.
Right. It's like having a human eye in the sky to see the whole planet.
In a way, yes. And secondly, it expands the scope of commercial spaceflight, showing that companies like SpaceX are pushing the boundaries of human exploration beyond traditional low Earth orbits.
So it's a commercial milestone as well.
Absolutely. And this mission also used the Crew Dragon capsule, which is a reusable spacecraft. So it highlights the success and reliability of reusable technology in making space travel more accessible and sustainable.
Reusable spacecraft, that's the future.
Definitely, SpaceX has now completed quite a few crewed missions using this capsule.
Wow, that's amazing. You also mentioned something called a sun-synchronous polar orbit. What's the advantage of that type?
So a sun-synchronous polar orbit, or SSO, is a special kind of polar orbit designed so that the satellite passes over the same spot on Earth at the same local solar time every day.
Okay.
This means the lighting conditions are consistent, which is incredibly useful for imaging and observation because it ensures that pictures taken over the same area at different times have similar illumination.
Right, so it makes it easier to compare images and track changes over time.
Exactly. It's a crucial factor for long-term monitoring and analysis.
Okay, great. Well, let's come back down to Earth now and talk about some economic developments. Specifically, the upcoming launch of the NITI NCAER States Economic Forum portal. It sounds like a pretty big data initiative.
It is. It's a collaborative project between NITI NCAER and the National Council of Applied Economic Research, or NCAER, and it's going to be launched by the Union Finance Minister.
Okay, so what's the purpose of this portal?
Think of it as a one-stop shop for information on the social, economic, and fiscal parameters of Indian states.
Okay. It'll have research findings, reports, expert commentary covering a period from 1990-91 all the way to 2022-23.
So it's a pretty comprehensive database.
It is. And for your UPSC preparation, understanding these trends and data is crucial for analyzing the economic landscape of India.
Right. So what kind of information will people be able to access on this portal?
Well, it's structured around four main components. First, there will be detailed state reports providing an overview of the macro and fiscal situation of all 28 states. These reports will use a wide range of indicators covering demography, economic structure, socioeconomic, and fiscal aspect.
There's a lot of data to dig into.
Yes, indeed. And then there's the data repository, which will give you direct access to the entire database organized into categories like demography, economic structure, fiscal data, health, and education.
So it's very user-friendly.
It's designed to be. Then there's a state fiscal and economic dashboard, which will present key economic variables through graphs and charts, making it easier to visualize the data. So it's not just raw numbers, it's also about presenting the information in a way that's easy to understand.
Exactly. And finally, there's the research and commentary section, which will feature in-depth analyses of state finances, covering fiscal policy and financial management.
Okay.
This will include perspectives from leading economists and policy experts.
So it's like a think tank for state finances.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
So what are the benefits of putting all this information together in one place? Well, it's going to significantly improve our understanding of long-term trends across all Indian states. It addresses the need for a single source of reliable data, and it will help states benchmark their performance against each other and against national averages.
So it promotes healthy competition.
Exactly. And the portal will also stimulate discussions among policymakers, researchers, and academics. It'll be a central hub for research and ultimately contribute to more evidence-based policymaking.
So it's not just about providing data, it's about using that data to make better decisions.
Precisely. And for your UPSC studies, this portal can be a valuable resource for understanding interstate disparities and the effectiveness of national policies.
Right. It gives you real-world data to back up your arguments.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's shift gears again now to the fascinating realm of science and technology. Specifically, a new development involving carbon dioxide lasers being used to remotely detect radioactive materials.
This is a great example of how a well-established technology is being applied in a completely innovative way.
Yeah, I mean, we usually think of lasers for cutting metal, not detecting radioactivity.
Exactly. But the principle behind this new application is quite clever.
Okay, so how does it work?
So when radioactive material decays, it emits ionizing radiation, which are basically charged particles. These particles interact with air molecules, causing them to lose electrons and become ions, creating a plasma.
Oh.
And this initial ionization can trigger an avalanche effect where these freed electrons collide with other atoms, leading to even more ionization.
It's like a chain reaction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, the researchers in this study used a long-wave infrared CO2 laser emitting at a specific wavelength of 9.2 micrometers. This wavelength was chosen to minimize unwanted ionization of the air and make the system more sensitive to the ionization caused by radioactive decay.
So they're fine-tuning the laser to target that specific type of ionization.
Precisely. Now, when this laser beam passes through the area where the radioactive decay has created this plasma, the electric field of the laser light accelerates the existing electrons in the plasma.
Okay.
This acceleration leads to the formation of tiny, highly localized pockets of intensely ionized gas called microplasma balls.
Microplasma balls. That's a cool name.
It is. And these microplasmas emit a measurable optical backscatter signal that can be detected from a distance.
So the laser's basically creating these tiny beacons that signal the presence of radioactive material.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. The researchers also use a technique called fluorescence imaging to study the dynamics of the plasma formation. And crucially, they developed a mathematical model to predict the characteristics of these backscatter signals based on the initial amount of plasma created by the radioactive decay.
So they're not just observing, they're also quantifying and modeling the process.
Absolutely. And this model has been validated against their experimental results, which shows the reliability of this new detection method.
So how does this new technique compare to previous methods in terms of detection range?
Well, existing techniques for detecting alpha particles, which is one type of radiation emitted during radioactive decay, have been limited to very short ranges, about 1 meter. This new laser-based method has successfully detected alpha particles from 10 meters away.
Wow, that's a 10-fold increase.
Exactly, a significant improvement. And their models suggest that with further optimization, it might be possible to detect gamma rays, which are more penetrating from distances up to 100 meters or even more.
That's incredible. What are the potential applications of this technology?
It could revolutionize nuclear safety, environmental monitoring, and security applications. Imagine being able to detect radioactive material from a safe distance without having to send in personnel or equipment.
That would be a huge advantage.
Absolutely. It could also be used to monitor nuclear facilities, search for radioactive contamination, or even detect smuggled nuclear materials.
So it has a wide range of potential uses.
It does, and it's a great example of how scientific research can lead to unexpected and beneficial applications.
All right, let's move on to a health topic that's becoming increasingly relevant: non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD.
Yes, this is a growing concern globally and in India.
So what exactly is NAFLD?
NAFLD, which is now often referred to as MASLD, stands for Metabolic Dysfunction-Associated Steatotic Liver Disease.
Okay.
It's a broad term covering conditions where fat builds up in the liver, but it's not due to heavy alcohol use.
So it's different from alcohol-related liver disease.
Exactly. In AFLD, the fat accumulation is linked to metabolic factors like obesity, diabetes, insulin resistance.
And is it a serious condition?
Well, in its early stages, NAFLD often doesn't cause any noticeable symptoms, and it might be considered relatively harmless. But it can progress to a more severe form called non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, or NASH.
NASH.
Yes, NASH involves inflammation and damage to liver cells in addition to the fat buildup, and this can eventually lead to serious liver damage like cirrhosis, liver failure, and even an increased risk of liver cancer.
Oh, wow, that's serious.
NAFLD is also linked to a higher risk of other metabolic disorders like type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, and kidney disease. And for people who already have diabetes, NAFLD can worsen their risk of heart problems.
So it's a complex condition with potentially serious consequences.
Exactly. And it can affect people of all ages, including children.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's becoming more common in young people, especially those who are overweight or obese.
So what are the treatment options for NAFLD?
Currently, there are no specific medications universally approved for NAFLD. The main recommendations from doctors focus on lifestyle changes, especially losing weight through diet and exercise.
So it's about addressing those underlying metabolic issues.
Precisely. Losing weight can reduce fat inflammation and fibrosis in the liver. Managing other conditions like high blood pressure, diabetes, and high cholesterol is also crucial.
So it's a holistic approach.
Absolutely. And it's encouraging to see that some places in India are taking proactive steps like Ranchi, which has become the first district in Jharkhand to implement large